Okay, so welcome to the April 1st, 2019 NAPI team meeting. We'll follow our standard agenda, which is to go through the milestone and the issues. Any announcements or things people want to add on to the list this week? If not, I will pull up the milestone and issues and share my screen. Milestones, oops, and I'm in the wrong repo, of course. Okay, share. Okay, so you should be able to see that one. So this one, separate or additional package on top of Node.js API. I don't know if there was any discussion on that last week.
Only that it seems to be heading this way de facto, because Nicola's doing the JSON stuff in a separate package. So that's about it, as far as I know. Right.
So this was, Hitesh's, and I guess, any comments on Hitesh's document here?
Honestly, I haven't read it yet.
Okay.
The same.
Sorry, what was that, Nicola?
Neither I.
Okay. So maybe that's the next step. Hitesh had the action to write up this as the two different options. And the next step, if people haven't had a chance to read that, is probably to go through and then maybe we can schedule some time to discuss it. But it sounds like, so we're, it may be like even the JSON parsing stuff, like even if we were to say, let's pull more stuff in, it's not clear that everything would still go in. So it's, I don't think that necessarily is pushing us one direction or the other necessarily. Okay, so on that one, people to read the doc and then we'll circle back next time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's probably best.
The focus on async workers. So there was the issue, which was the one on OSX that had slowed us down, but as of last week, that was landed. I'm just going to go to right. Basically, Gabriel, you had a PR in, and it looked like it was going to land in Node.js, right?
Yeah, and I think Nicola has a PR for documenting that in support of OS 10, people should add the visibility flag, because the Node.js stuff is going to promulgate very slowly, so they won't get that for free for probably another few years.
Right. Okay. Okay, so we bundled that in. There's some documentation. Is there so that's a PR that should probably land, right?
Talk about the Node.js one?
Oh, this is the PR right here, right?
You mean the? Okay, let me see here.
This is the documentation that I wrote about macOS 6, and the Gabriel's paragraph is already landed.
Right. Yep. Okay. So basically, we just need to land this one.
Yes.
And then we should be probably in 442. Let's see. So where do we stand on that one? Okay, so it still seems like a fair amount of back and forth on that one, right? Just sort of catching up to see where we think we are in terms of the release itself.
You answered Gabriel here.
Right. Right. So this one we should probably figure out, right? Because right, but I think as you said, Gabriel, you shouldn't need the bundled version, right?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, if this person is building against an old version of Node, then yes. See, I don't understand the point that Node is unneeded for recent Node if I don't add Node. Yeah, there's a misunderstanding between.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'll try to clarify this.
Right.
463.
I mean, it sounds like he's getting like. Hopefully, it's just a misunderstanding because
yeah. Looks like
it should just be that you know, as you know, if you're building with a version that supports an API, you don't need any of those bundled files, right? So.
That's right.
Okay, so I guess for those of you in the discussion around 442, do we think it's worth waiting a little bit longer for that one, or should we go ahead and do a release with the rest of them?
442, is that the thread safe function?
This is, yeah.
Yes, thread safe function.
Yeah. This one.
Yeah, I started looking at that. I think what Kevin has is good, but I'm trying to figure out what like where his branch is at. I just did a diff between his branch and master, and I'm just looking through the sort of changes that he's making, and yeah, it's pretty good. I one thing that I don't quite understand is why I think both him and Roman Dev why they're templating so much, because like they are trying to cover the use case where things are null, and you know, each one of those combinations of this is null, that is not null, that is null, this is not null requires an override, like a different new method with a different signature.
Okay.
And they're templating those things, but since the class itself is also templated, I don't quite understand why they need to template those, because if they mention any of the type names listed in the template, then that will be templated implicitly. So they do have default types for the template parameters of null pointer, and so maybe that's forcing them. But I have to look in more detail. But it's actually it's pretty good. Like there's no easy way to do thread safe function. So what
Right.
we have is pretty good. I just have to go through it and have a look, and most importantly, I'd like to get a feel for what it will be like writing code with this
Right.
with this
Okay.
function in place, so that, because I'd like to avoid having people explicitly template their stuff, so I'd like to be able to come up with an interface that they can just use, and the data types just automatically work because the templating infers them properly. So that would probably be ideal, so
Okay.
that people can just use them. But yeah, I'd like to basically write some code using this API, and so I grabbed the code from Kevin, because he seems to have built upon what Roman Dev has. So that's why I grabbed
Yep.
the code from him, and yeah, I just write, I don't know, something,
Okay.
with the thread safe function, and we'll go from there. I'll look at the test too. I haven't really had a chance to see how the C test translates into C++.
Okay.
Yeah, just needs a pair of eyes, and the more the merrier, of course. The more pairs, the merrier.
But it sounds like, the original question is like, should we go ahead with release or wait for this? It sounds like you think it's not too far off. Or you think it's a bit more time?
I don't know. We can always make another release afterwards, and it would actually be, one thing would be nice is if we made a release for after we drop 6, because then then we can claim that it supports an API version 4, and so on and so forth. So either way, the release, which includes thread safe function, is going to have a little bit more wind in its sails, because it also happens to be version 4 of an API.
Okay.
So I think we can release without it.
Okay. So basically, we just land 460, then we could probably go ahead and do a release.
Yeah, I think
with
so.
the plan for release after that. Any volunteers to do the release once we do that?
Okay, I can.
Okay.
If you want.
Yeah, no, sounds good. So we'll try and get 460 reviewed, and then anytime after that one's reviewed, you can go ahead and do the release.
Okay, when you land my paragraphs, I start working on a new release.
Sounds good. Okay. I'm going to try and go back now. Okay. I guess we still have to loop back on the async worker larger issues, but I guess let's get this release out there with the initial changes, and then we can loop back on that. This one, I don't know if there's anything new to discuss in terms of these. Well, I guess, Jim, you're working on SQLite 3.
Yeah, yep, I'm making progress on that. Following in the footsteps of Anisha and Samson, it's been an interesting process to see the process they went through and kind of follow what they had done. So that's continuing in progress.
Okay, sounds good. Let's see. We should probably have serial ports. I guess I've said this a few times, but I do need to follow up with Glenn just to see where he is on a couple of these. iConv, I know, Nikolai, you were working to get a new PR.
Yeah, but I didn't receive any response.
Okay. So maybe we just need a... Okay, posted a comment, seeing if Ben's going to have a chance to take a look. Bcrypt, I think you've given us an update. Anything new on that front, or is it just wait till?
No, they won't support the classical Bcrypt with classical API until the end of support for Node.js version 8. And then they will switch to an API.
Yeah.
So,
okay. So I think that's about it. Okay. Burn down the list of issues in the Node repo. Any interesting new ones since last week?
There was one reported on ABI stable node about thread safe function running stuff after everything is done. So I'm going to have a look at that.
Okay. There's one in the Node core repo about a leak related to references.
Yeah, I saw that one. I didn't get a chance to look much into it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's on my radar.
Yeah, I investigated that before I went away. And I think I confirmed that there's something going on there, but I didn't get far enough to see where it is. Although it kind of seemed to me that it might be in some of the underlying stuff as opposed to the NAPI implementation. But
yeah. That's sort of the impression I gathered as well. That it seems that the callback simply isn't getting called, and if it's not getting called, there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, unless we're doing something wrong. But since it sometimes gets called, it seems like.
Well, the interesting thing is that it seems to coincide with having switched to that secondary callback or secondary weak callback that gets called during the phase of garbage collection where the heap is already in a consistent.
Although I think I tried to eliminate that.
Oh, and it was still leaking?
It still seemed to do the same thing to me.
Okay. All
like
right,
I might not have done it right, but what I did try and do was basically like I commented out the secondary one and just made the
inlined it basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So
Yeah. Because that's how it was before. It was inline.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't think, I mean, like I said, I'm not 100% confident I did the right things, but from what I've looked at so far, I didn't think that was necessarily related.
Yeah. Need to look further.
The other thing I tried to eliminate was like, was it that the GC wasn't just not catching up?
Right.
And I couldn't really show that there was any evidence of that either, although that's sometimes hard to do because you don't know whether, just because you call the GC doesn't mean it actually happens, right?
That's right. Yeah. Well, I mean, the evidence would be that the number of weak callbacks equals the number of created references, right? I mean, the GC will have caught up if that's the case, right? If you unreference everything on the JavaScript side, then there is no reason why there would be a gap between the number of references created and the number of times the weak callback gets called.
Except I don't think there's any guarantee as to when that will happen.
No, that's right. But
right. So like you could have, it could be that it might happen. It just might happen later on.
Right. I mean, I'm saying like if you run this for a while and then you let it do its thing, like just be quiescent, then eventually it should catch up. If it never catches up, or if it doesn't catch up within a reasonable amount of time, then I think that points to a bug.
But you'd have to have real stuff happening that would force the GC to happen.
Yeah.
So I mean, I did some things like I tried to slow it down so that there was more GCs in terms of the ratio, like the forced GCs versus a ratio of being what was being created.
Right.
And that did not fix it. Like if that had fixed it, that would have made me think, oh, it's just not keeping up. So that's where I tried to see if I could show that, but I couldn't.
Right.
So, okay. So so we need to just get back and look at that one in more depth. Other than that, I think the async worker one we definitely still need to come back and think about. But to be honest, I haven't had a chance to do that yet, so I'm not really prepared.
Yeah, I mean we've done one small obvious low-hanging fruit out of that whole raft of suggestions, and so we need to look at the next one now.
Right. So maybe we can plan that to be the focus of next week's meeting.
Sure.
If we, hopefully that we try and carve off a little time to think about it, and then we can talk about it next week and see if we can make some progress. Okay. Any other topics people want to talk about this week?
I don't know. Is there any progress on conferences and talks and stuff? Because we have been talking about doing another workshop. Yeah,
we should definitely. I think I mentioned that we should think about that. Do we have an issue that's open?
I opened an issue about the workshop, and I posted the reference that we of all materials that we already have.
Right. I'm going to tag that so that we remember to talk about it. Is this the agenda item? Actually, hold on. Let's see.
I think we just have the milestone. We don't have the agenda label.
Oh, yeah, right. Yes, okay. Right. That makes sense. So just milestone. What's the slide? Right. Okay, so slides, right? We have the slides starting new add-on from scratch.
It's a list of tutorials that Jim prepared for the last workshops. And maybe we can add some new things like pre-build. The usage of pre-build could be useful, or if we land the thread save function, we can add a tutorial about thread save function. So.
Okay, so I guess on that topic, do we think that, should we propose just a workshop? Should we propose a talk? What kind of things do we think we should be submitting this year?
A workshop for sure. I think that's been pretty. It's had quite an impact. Our workshop.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Will we be able to adequately distinguish this workshop from the one we did last year? NAPI was relatively new a year ago, and my concern is that we can create a workshop that will interest the conferences to actually run again. You know what I mean?
No. Yeah, I don't know how different it needs to be.
Yeah, I mean it's quite a hill to climb, right? To move the whole ecosystem to an API. So I think it need not necessarily be innovative, rather than just available, so that we can. Right. Oh, and actually, now that I think about it, one thing we can focus on this year, in addition to an API, is a context awareness for add-ons. Try to get add-on maintainers or those starting out making new add-ons, keep in mind context awareness, because workers are becoming ever more mainstream, and right. And Anna's done an awesome job making sure that native add-ons can take advantage of that. In fact, I believe we are now at the point where native add-ons are fully context aware, but such context awareness requires buy-in from the add-on maintainers. And so focusing or sort of shining a light and emphasizing and evangelizing the need for add-on maintainers to also render their add-ons context aware, I think, is something we can add to a workshop about add-ons.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. So
actually,
yeah,
I'm always itching to remove that comment made by Ben Nordhaus so many years ago on top of process.dl open, that it's not context aware. I keep having time for it, but I think it's time to remove that comment now.
Right.
These things certainly are context aware these days.
Yeah, no, definitely. Did you put out that blog post?
It's in the pipe apparently. Okay. I'm waiting to hear back from the person who will post it.
Okay. Because that reminds me of that you did had a good description of that. So yeah, I think that emphasizing that there's some of those other things that you can come and learn as well would make sense.
Yeah. So maybe the blurb could be along the lines, as NAPI experiences continued adoption, that there's some things that have come up that have been, that people need to be aware of.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And at some point, I think we slowly have to adopt sort of the mantra that NAPI isn't the new way of doing add-ons, and NAPI is the way of doing add-ons.
There is no other way. Yeah.
So doing add-ons by linking directly to V8 has to sort of shrink into obscurity sooner or later, because it just has to.
Yeah, like we could title the workshop like building add-ons with Node.js or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then some of the major content could be NAPI and how you use NAPI to do that.
Yeah, like
and when you don't use it to build, right? But
sort of like a native add-on workshop kind of thing.
Yeah,
held by the NAPI working group. Hint, hint.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, right? Like, because I think that's got a as an education thing, it's going to just always be, there's newer people who will be coming along who want to
exactly. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yes, NAPI is all they know and all they should know, essentially. Yeah. I mean, not to be presumptuous or anything, but this has to happen sooner or later, and we have to show what it's like to be a person for whom an API is taken for granted, so that we may be, examples.
And I think in the tutorial part, we probably need one which is like using TFSN.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Whew. I'll see if I can make the example more step by step, because the example is just sort of, here's the example, take it and run.
Right.
But working up to an example is probably something that needs doing.
So the focus would be more on the benefit of the end product rather than the technology used to get there. Where last year it was more focused on an API, this would be more focused on building add-ons.
Yeah.
I think that might be a good way to start shifting to. It's like, building add-ons, and then it's like, okay, well, this is the API, and well, when not to use it, like, okay, you don't use it when there's specific situations, otherwise you should be using it. And that's why like TFSN is important. Like, here's a way that you don't need to use these other APIs and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody want to volunteer to take a first cut at the abstract for it?
I'd be happy to do that, Michael.
Okay, sounds good. So Jim, first cut abstract. Now, I mean, we started with the a definite yes for the workshop. Do we think talks are worth submitting as well?
Yeah, we have another issue opened about the talks.
Okay.
We separated.
Right, this one. Okay.
Yeah.
Would it? How about? Would there be enough interest in a talk about how an API can be used in core, or plans about that, or directions that need to be taken there?
Yeah, although I don't think we haven't had those discussions.
Okay.
Or done any work. Otherwise, it would be an interesting one. But
okay, so that might be for next year.
Yeah, I would like to talk about the possibility to write a wrapper over an API with different programming languages. So, Nikolai, what are you talking about? Like to support other languages, like?
I'm working with Go and the NAPI C API. I wrote very simple add-on.
Okay.
But now I want. I'm trying to write a wrapper like Node.js API. If I will able to finish the work in a month, I won't propose this because for different reasons. Because I won't demonstrate that even if you want to use another programming language, it's possible, and you have all the advantage. The same advantage on writing the native add-on using an API, because you don't need to take care of changes in V8 or in Node. You only need to wrap an API. Even if you wrap a previous version of an API, your native add-on continue to work.
Right.
And you can work on your wrapper in a different velocity of an API. So you don't need to add the new feature that will be released in an API very soon. So I'm saying this because there is a very good wrapper of classical API written in Rust.
Right.
But they have many problems at every Node.js release. So my point is, Go is not very good to address this task because I don't like particularly its FFAI, and because when you create a wrapper, you have to import the C code, use the C code, and export or like C library, C static library or C shared library, and then use it. And it's very difficult in Go. So if I will be able to do this in Go, you can use other programming language like Rust or maybe Kotlin or Swift in a very easy way, because their FFAI is to allow you to do what you need to write the wrapper in a very easy way. And this is because the best difficulty is that Go is a garbage collected language. So you have to create some interaction mechanism to call Go function from C. This is the best difficult.
Okay, so basically, so I understand this would let you write your add-on in Go?
Yeah.
Right, okay. That's definitely interesting to basically say, okay, you know, the API is flexible enough and it lets you say, okay, I don't want to use C, I want to use Go instead, right? So
yeah,
I think but people would find that interesting.
You can use any of the programming languages that allow you to import C code.
Okay.
This is the point, essentially.
Right, and just to use Go as an example to that, right?
It's just an example. It's just an implementation.
Okay. Now you said something about Rust. There's challenges with Rust?
In Rust, the things to create the wrapper is easy because you have a tool called BeamGen, Rust BeamGen, and you can create the first raw wrapper with this tool, and then you can use all the Rust stuff, structure, etc., and to create an abstraction. And the same for example, Kotlin or for example Swift, and they allow to do these things in a very easy way.
Okay. I thought you just said there was some problem, but it sounds like it works pretty well. So, but no, yeah, I think that would be definitely a good talk.
Okay.
So Gabriel, you have the life and times of a native add-on. That sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. Basically, I'm planning on just sort of walking everybody through what happens and how we load native add-ons and all the different trade-offs that have happened throughout its history and the native loader, how it has evolved, that kind of thing, and trying to put emphasis on context awareness again, because we're going to need that and soon.
Right.
Because we're going to have so many bugs, this works if I load it once, but it loads if I load it twice, but then it's sec faults and
right.
Stuff like that. Because like right now, so far we actually had a situation where publishing a native add-on as context aware required that you make a very explicit code change, which is to move away from the library constructor based loader to the well-known symbol based loader, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now that Anna has made it possible to use the library constructor based loader by remembering the NM module and keeping it in a hash table, now modules will implicitly be assumed to be context aware. So,
right.
They will no longer fail to load multiple times, even though they're using the old mechanism.
Right. Okay.
So now that no more explicit effort is required on the module owner to render the module context aware, now module owners will have to be made aware of that, because nobody's going to come to them and say, please use a Node module in it, instead of Node module, or Nappy module in it instead of Nappy module, because it'll still load.
Yep.
And so the errors will be more subtle now, and those subtle is not necessarily good in this case.
No, that's true. But I assume you'll mention NEPI in that. That
oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, and NEPI is a big reason why this is becoming important, because the focus is no longer on oh no, V8 broke again, I have to rebuild the module.
Yeah.
Thanks to an API, that's no longer the focus. Now the focus is, okay, now we have multiple JavaScript threads, but only one chunk of memory that is dedicated to a module, because that's what a shared object is. It gets mapped once and then never again. So now you need to worry about the thread isolation explicitly and in your own code. You don't get that for free by having just one instance per process.
Yeah.
So these things need to be emphasized.
Right. Okay.
Gabriel, a question. Do we need something to do to support these on Node.js API, or it works?
Right. I was thinking about that very, very often, and maybe I'll throw it out there. But basically, what I was thinking about is if we could write a class something like native add-on. The name of the class is native add-on, right? And then the init function returns a new instance of native add-on, right? And a native add-on could be a superclass of object wrap, because you can if you return an instance of native add-on, then that's an instance, a JavaScript instance of a JavaScript class, right?
It's a creative pattern,
right? And that would basically mean that you intentionally ignore the exports object that gets passed into the init function, and you return a new object, which is fine. That's okay. It's possible to do that, and it's perfectly acceptable. And if we did it this way, if we abstracted things this way with this like native add-on class, then we would get potentially, I shouldn't say that absolutely. We would potentially get context awareness, unless the definition of the subclass of native add-on has static fields, right? Which people are free to declare, right? But as soon as you do that, you lose context awareness. So even if we did that, even if we created this class, we would still have to tell people, listen, yes, we have this class, but please don't add anything static, because that defeats the whole purpose of context awareness.
Right. I guess what you're saying is that would be a place where now, does it actually need to be a class, or can it be a pattern that we say, like, here's a pattern you can follow?
Oh yeah. The pattern is already there. I think it's already on Node add-on examples. I posted one for context awareness. I believe it's been merged. Yeah. I'd have to check, but yeah. So the pattern is basically you declare this class yourself, and then you instantiate it during init, and then you pass a pointer, or you pass around the pointer to the instance that you created to all of your bindings. So basically, when you create your binding, you give it not just a function name and a native function pointer. You also give it the data. You make use of the data pointer that we've always had, and for which we had to add Nappy add finalizer, because we didn't add a finalizer to Nappy create function. So we had to add one after the fact. And one of the important reasons for that is so you can then free that pointer. So basically the pattern is that you declare your bindings, you declare them with data. The data is always the instance to that function point, or the instance to that or a pointer to that instance. And the first thing you do in all your bindings is you reinterpret cast the void star to that instance before you do anything else. So if we can abstract this away, good, but we have to do it so that we don't add yet another layer of indirection where you write bindings for context-aware add-ons and not bindings for Node add-on API. So because then that's yet another level of thunking, and at that point it just doesn't make any sense. So we have to do it without changing the signature for a callback, and that's actually kind of it seems like a shortcoming of C++. Like you can't write a function wrapper that that basically does one thing and then calls another function. You can't do that in line. You have to create a new function, and then that's a new function pointer, and that's a new chunk, and that's an indirection, and it just doesn't work, you know. So we need to do this with documentation alone, I think.
Okay.
But yeah. So yeah, there is a chance for an abstraction, but I'm not sure how far we can take it before we run into the problem of having to run yet another set of indirections.
Right.
But yeah, so yeah, emphasizing context awareness, I think, is the next big thing now.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I think if we had that talk, that would probably, like, we still want to have an API on people's radar, but that's probably enough.
Yeah.
Plus the one that Nick mentioned is a good one as well.
Yeah, we shouldn't de-emphasize an API to our own detriment.
No, absolutely.
I don't think we're there yet.
No. It still definitely needs the evangelizing to get it out there. So, and continue to think of any other talks that we might get in to give it some exposure. But those two would definitely be a good start.
Cool.
The other thing I'll mention is there was an email from Kevin working on the TFSN PR. Says there's an implementation detail that wants to verify this correct approach, needing to template both the context and finalizer data type. He left a comment and he'd like some feedback and how to continue before proceeding. So I think you'd mentioned that you had some questions around needing to template a number of things, and it sounds about that as well. So.
Yeah, I'm looking at that code, and it looks okay. I mean, it is kind of needed, but I'd like to see what the code looks like from the add-on maintainer's perspective, and how they would go about using the code.
Right. Okay.
And to minimize the need for explicit templating.
Yeah. Sounds good. Okay. Any other topics we should cover?
Just one minor thing. I added another example. I submitted a PR for another example, one where a native add-on accepts an array buffer from the JavaScript side. Like an array buffer is created on the JavaScript side, because there was this person who correctly realized that translating a JavaScript array into a native array is an extremely expensive operation.
Right. Yeah.
But they didn't seem to be aware of the existence of typed arrays and array buffers, and so I pointed them to that, and I also wrote an example for their benefit, and it might be a more generally beneficial example. So,
definitely. I think it would be good to have it there. So it's like, here's an example of that.
Yeah. It's not ideal because the type of the array buffer is sort of assumed on the native side. So I guess an improvement on the example might be to pass the typed array to the native side, and then have the native side validate that it's of the correct type. So that would sort of be the next step. But it could also be a separate example, because sometimes you'd want the array buffer to go across rather than the higher level view of it.
Right.
So that's sort of a degree of freedom. We can write one example, both examples, only the top level example. But so far I just wrote the array buffer because that's what they wanted. They wanted a native array, and an array buffer is that.
Yep. Well, no, yeah. If we start with the one we have, that's good.
Yeah. So that's the only small thing.
My thinking is that this is not the first issue where people ask us this kind of question. And what do you think if we add in the basic type documentation some little explanation about this? If you will pass a very big array, this is a very expensive operation, and maybe you can consider to use array buffer, etc. What do you think?
Yeah.
No, that would definitely be good.
Okay. I will do this week.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, just looking at the docs for array, and indeed, we should probably mention that as a by the way, because this is strictly API documentation when we look at array.
Yeah.
So as kind of a footnote at the end, because array happens to be the last thing on that page. So as a footnote, you might want to add, or we might want to add that that by the way, it can get expensive for large arrays and use array buffer instead, or a typed array. Yeah, it's an excellent idea.
Okay.
Yep, definitely sounds good.
Yep.
Okay, well, if that's it for this week, then thanks for everybody for attending, and we will talk to you all next week.
Sorry, one more very small thing. Just a sort of a general observation. As more and more people are using Node add-on API, I'm starting to see that we're getting issues which are not necessarily Node add-on API related, right? So general things, general JavaScript and general bindings writing issues are sort of landing on our doorstep now that more people are going through Node add-on API to do this work, right?
Yep.
So it's just something I think we should be expecting more in the future, right? So more of a sort of helping people out instead of just fixing bugs kind of thing. It seems to be happening like on its own.
Yeah, that makes sense. And this group is sort of, has an interest in that area. So it makes sense to me as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good thing to see. Just wanted to mention that. All right. So I guess we'll see each other next week.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Talk to you later.
All right.
Bye.
Later on. Bye.
Bye.